Hey, good morning. This is Pastor Jon Baker. I'm the senior pastor here at Chillicothe Assembly of God. And I just want to say thank you for tuning in and joining us today. Before I get started with my sermon, there's a few things I want to say. I want to start saying thank you to a couple of people here. I want to say thank you to my wife for preaching for me last week. I got sick on Saturday night and she just jumped in and did a sermon for me. And so just thank you so much for doing that. Also, I want to say thank you to Matthew and Beth Dutton as they have done worship and Kids Corner for us. I just want to say thank you and God bless you guys, and thank you for following what God has put on your heart to do this. I know it's not easy being a full-time parent and having a full-time job, plus getting things ready to prepare for Sunday. That way the gospel will continue to be spread. So thank you so much. And if you guys are being blessed by the Kids Corner or worship, go to our Facebook page and underneath send them a message. Let them know how valuable their things are, and God is just blessing us through this. So once again, Matt and Beth, thank you so much for doing what God has placed upon your heart. Also, for the next 4 weeks, it looks like we're going to continue to stay via online through our Facebook or our YouTube channel, as our governor said that we need to extend our stay-at-home order. So we just thank God during this time we have the technology and the know-how to continue to spread the gospel. So until we get back in the church June 1st, hopefully, we're just going to continue to spread the gospel through the internet. And we're just going to make the best situation and praise God because He is still on the throne even through this time. Well, today we're going to be talking about what to do when we find ourselves in bitter water. And it doesn't make a difference if you're a non believer or a believer. As long as you live, you're going to find yourself in bitter situations, in areas where you feel like you can't go on. You're going to find yourself in the wilderness, per se. Today, we're going to be looking in the book of Exodus, chapter 15, verse 22 through 27. At this time, this is what Israel found themselves at. They found themselves in a predicament where they have found themselves in a place where bitter waters always surrounded them. And so, hopefully, after this message, you guys will learn and be able to navigate through times that when we find ourselves in bitter situations, what can we do? How can we get through this? Because as believers, we know we have a God we can trust, and His word never comes back void in our lives, and we know we can rely on Him. So when we look at verse 22, it says, "So Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur. And they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. Now, when they came to Marah, they could not drink the waters of Marah, for the water was bitter. Therefore, the name was called Marah." So Marah was meaning bitterness. And this is where Israel found themselves at. They found themselves in the wilderness for 3 days with no water. And now they come to a place where they believe they have water. We all been there before, where we find ourselves thanking God, "Oh, you brought me through a miracle," and then we find out the miracle is not what we expected it to be. It wasn't the place where we find deliverance from. And that's where Israel is at right now. Israel has found their place right here. So when life gets hard, when life gets bitter, what do? How do we navigate through this? How do we get through these bitter and rough times? Well, first of all, what we need to do, we always have to go back and have remembrance of our faithful God. What God has done for us in the past. We have to look about things that we have found our place in a place where we find we can't find a way out. But God made a way out of no way. And this is something that we need to, what I call a spiritual Kodak moment. We have to sit back and look at all the things that God has done for us then. And that way, when we're facing Marah, the bitter water all around us, we know the same God that helped us then will help us now. Now, in Israel format, when we look at verse 19, they were trapped between the Red Sea. And God miraculously opened up the Red Sea, and they walked right through the Red Sea onto the other side, and the water came crashing down. That's what we need to have. We need to have our Red Sea moments where when we're facing trouble, when we're facing tribulation, we can look back and see what God has done for us right then. When we're facing bitter water here, have we ever been to a spot where bitter water came before, and how did God navigate us through that bitter water? This is what we need to do. We always need to go back to our Red Sea moments and remember the faithfulness of God. The God that helped us then is the same God that will help us now. His credentials never change. We can put a lot of scenarios within this. We can say, well, right now I'm having relationship problems. Well, let me ask you a question. Have you had a relationship problem before that God intervened and he brought you through? Well, you could say I'm having financial problems. Well, have you had a financial problem before that God intervened and he brought you through? This is one thing we have to remember for when we get to these desert times, when we get to the place where bitter water all surrounds us and we cannot find any way out. We have to remember the time that God sat right there and led us through these same times as we walk forth. And the same God that did it then will do it now. Now, sometimes it comes quicker than others. There's times that we might be praising God in church 1 minute, and as soon as we get out of church, then we're in a Marah situation where bitter waters come around us. When we look at Israel, verse 20 tells us that they were singing praises to God after the Red Sea. They said Moses' sister brought the cymbals up and he claimed them together as he danced before the Lord, exalting him high. And then 3 days later, they found no water, and the water was bitter at Marah. And so what are they going to do now? Well, with us, we have to remember that God is always faithful, and he's always going to lead us through no matter what we think. When we can't find a way, our God has a way for us to go through. Now, that is a lot easier said than done, but sometimes we need to take a step back when we're at the bitter waters of Marah. Remember our Kodak moments that Jesus had led us from the Red Sea to here. Now, if we don't have these moments, it's hard to have belief that Jesus can do this for us. That's why we have to remember these things and know and understand that the same God that we served then when he made us for deliverance then is the same God that's going to deliver us now. Now, bitter time is going to come. And it usually comes right after you have your Red Sea moment. Well, how do we know this? Because verse 22 tells us that Moses brought Israel out of the Red Sea. Then they went into the wilderness. So most likely, your wilderness is going to come after the Red Sea moment. Why will the wilderness come after the Red Sea moment? Well, because that is the only route to Canaan. See, from the Red Sea to Canaan, there was only one route they can take, and that was the wilderness. And when they're moving through the wilderness, they knew they were going towards Canaan. So when you find yourself in the wilderness, know something, that you're moving to something greater that God wants for you. So don't get discouraged. Step back and look and ask God what you need for me to see during this time while I'm in the wilderness. Remember the things that God has done for you while you're in the wilderness, and that he delivered you from before, that he would do again. Another thing we have to remember and have to understand, we need to stop blaming people and others for our situation while we're in the wilderness. Blaming and complaining to people is no good, because most likely God has us there for a reason. Now, when we look at verse 24, it lets us know, and the people complained against Moses, saying, "What shall we drink?" So he cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree. When he cast the tree into the waters were made sweet. There he made a statue in the ordinance for them, and he tested them. So majority of the time when we find ourselves in the desert, when we find ourselves around bitter water, when we find ourselves in the wilderness, it's because God is testing us. God is trying to strengthen us for we can know that he can rely on us when we find ourselves in troubled times. This is one thing we have to continue to believe in, is that we are here for a reason. We don't understand a lot of times what God's plans for our lives, but we have to trust in the God that made us and created us, that he knows what's best for our life. Now, you might find yourself in different situations where you're frustrated and you want to complain about people and to people. If you look at Exodus 17, verse 2, they found themselves in the same situation when they had no water. And it says, therefore, the people contested and complained with Moses and said, give us water that we may drink. So Moses said to them, why are you content with me? Why do you test the Lord? So a lot of times when we find ourselves in these situations of bitter times, when bitter water is all around us and we're in the desert, in the wilderness, it's God testing us. God's putting us through tests to see where our faithfulness is. Sometimes these are like a stress test. When you're walking on the treadmill on the incline, you don't want to be there. But it is something God is trying to test your heart, trying to see where you are about. How can he further his gospel through you, and how can he entrust you with the plans that he has for your future and his people? So a lot of times when we are finding ourselves in these situations and we're complaining to others and complaining about others, we are wasting our breath, because it's not them that is putting us here. It's God that's put us here. We have to realize that not every bitter water situation that we have is because it's our fault. It's sometimes God is placing us there for he can test our heart, for we can see and grow us more and furthermore. That way we can continue to spread his gospel. Now, God tests us in many ways. In Deuteronomy 8:1 verse 3, God told him, I tested you to humble you in the wilderness. So sometimes it's a humbling situation. It's letting us know that we cannot do this alone. Now, why would God do this? God is doing this for a simple fact that he is trying to increase our deficiency on him. He wants to let us know that we cannot do this alone. Only he can lead us through these times. I know we can all count on times that we have tried to get out of situations by ourselves and we couldn't do it. We made a bigger mess than when we started from. It's when God is saying, you cannot do this, so leave it up to me to get you through this. God is trying to make us know that him alone is the only one we need to depend on. We can't depend on ourselves. We can't depend on the government. We can't depend on our jobs. All of them are going to fail us. But only the true God in heaven who created us can navigate us through these times. Now, I know a lot of times right now we are seeing bitter times. We are seeing rough times. We're seeing things that we have never seen before, and we're getting discouraged. Well, let me tell you this. We might not have never seen COVID-19 before, but we can contest a situation where we thought we're not getting anywhere. And God led us from there to now. Now that we're going through this, God is going to meet us right here, and he's going to move us to the next spot. We always know we're moving when we find ourselves in a test situation. And that's the way I look at the church right now. We're in a test situation. So from the time of our period here until Canaan, we're on the move in the wilderness, and God is going to put the church forth. That way we're going to blossom and shine for his greatness throughout this land. We might be depressed and down now, but at the end of this, God is going to get the glory, and we're going to see the purpose of this all as he humbles us to spread his gospel more and more. God makes sure he tested his people. God makes sure he wants to know that we can hold up and venture our ways through life as the problems come. It's easy to test your anchor on a boat when there's calm waters. But if you want to know what that anchor is really made of, Wait till it's storming outside and cast your anchor out then. Then you can see exactly what it's made of. And that's what God is saying now. Through this storm, cast me out and hold on to me, and I will make sure I give you deliverance. This test is here to strengthen us. This test is here to make sure that we are going in the right direction. God is making sure that we can hold up and furthermore the gospel. I remember when I was in high school, me and a friend of mine was driving, and he was in his dad's car, and we got into a bad car accident where the car behind us slid and hit us, and we hit the car in front of us. But the thing is, the car that we hit had a massive damage, but the car that we were in did not hardly have damage at all. And as we sat there and we talked to his dad, he said, this is why I picked this car, because this car went through a series of tests. It went through tests where they crash it, and then they rebuild it, then they crashed it again, then they rebuild it, then they crash it again to make sure it can hold up when viable situations like what we did happen. Now, I'm pretty sure if that car can talk, it would say, why? Why in the world did you continue to crash me? And I'm pretty sure the manufacturer said, well, you know, we wanted to make sure you can hold up, because one day you're going to have a special cargo. He's going to be the head pastor of Chillicothe Assembly of God. And he was called by God there to preach and to teach and to spread the gospel. So we wanted to make sure when that time came and he was in that car, he did not get hurt and spoil the plans that God had for him. Well, when you became saved, you had a special passenger called Jesus Christ in your heart. And he wanted to make sure that the testing that he went through to you can go through. That way you have that passenger still inside you when the rough time comes. I know right now a lot of us are getting discouraged. I know for myself that when I heard we have another month outside the church, I was very discouraged. I was hoping May 3rd was the time that we all get together again and we all can fellowship again. But I tell you, this is a test that we need to look back and lean on and say our anchor through the storm is going to get us through. We need to make sure that we pass these qualities of tests, because that special passenger that is in our heart is going to stay there, and we can drive through anything because we know who we're carrying. So my encouraging word for you today is this. When you face them bitter water times, when you face the times in the wilderness, cling on to your anchor. Remember your Red Sea days. Remember the days that God found the way when there was no way that you can see. Remember that if he's the same God then, he's going to be the same God now. And what God is going to do now, he is going to move the church from this place to the Canaan land. And we're all going to rejoice as when this is over, because we know God's glory is going to be fulfilled, and we're going to see a massive upbringing in God's name. So from Chillicothe Assembly of God to all you guys right now, I pray that you guys stay safe. I pray that you guys stay connected. And just remember the Red Sea days, when your days feel like you're in bitter water. Thank you.